So now Jesus and his disciples are in the Garden of Gethsemane. John has one more statement which I need to include before I go on with the others. And that is, and Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place where Jesus often resorted there with his disciples. Then it skips all the way to Judas arriving and arresting him. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke have a lot more information. So I will have that statement from John. Judas knew of the place. Then I'll go on to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And Judas. Also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus often resorted there with his disciples. Now, before I go any further with John, because that just goes into his arrest, Luke says, and when he was at the place, all of those words are more descriptive here between Matthew, Mark, and John. He is Jesus, then instead of when. He was at the place. He went forth with disciples. And. So maybe I could put that and to be from Luke as well. Oh, you know what? The place is in John. I'll have the and in the statement from John. Luke and John, so it's green. And also the place, Luke and John. Luke continues with, he said to them, pray that you enter not into temptation. And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast, and kneeled down and prayed. So there's a group of people here that he says, pray. Then he goes further. Matthew says to the disciples, sit you here while I go and pray yonder. So he's speaking to a group, could be the same group from Luke. But instead of saying, pray that you enter not into temptation, he's saying, sit here while I pray. Then he took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, James and John, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. And says to them, so there was that group, which is probably now all the disciples. He goes further with Peter, James, and John and says, my soul is exceeding sorrowful even to death. Tarry you here and watch with me. So Luke said, pray that you enter not into temptation. Both statements from Matthew are not about temptation. But he does say, watch with me. That's kind of close. But then after he says, watch with me, from Matthew, he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed. I think that is what's said here in Luke. He was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast. Which means I'm going to start with Matthew. He's speaking to the larger group. Sit you here while I go and pray yonder. He takes Peter, James, and John further. Says something to them. Then he goes a little further, but I'll use the words from Luke. A stone's cast. Then prays. So speaks to the group. goes further with the 3, speaks to the 3, goes even further, a stone's cast. Mark he says to his disciples, so this is all of them, sit you here while I pray. Same thing in Matthew. Then he takes Peter, James, and John, began to be sore amazed and very heavy, and says to them, my soul is exceeding sorrowful to death, tarry you here and watch. Same like Matthew. Then again he went a little further and fell on the ground and prayed. So Matthew and Mark have him speaking to the whole group. Luke, I think he's only speaking to the smaller group, Peter, James, and John, because it only has one separation mentioned, and it's pray that you enter not into temptation, which is more similar to the second statement, tarry here and watch, instead of just sit here while I pray. In neither of these statements in Matthew or Mark is he telling them to pray. As it says in Luke, so I'm just going to have to add that. But the fact that there's only one statement and then he goes further and prays makes it most fit with the second statement in Matthew and Mark. So I'm beginning with Matthew, Mark, and says to the disciples, and he says to the disciples. Luke, when he was at the place, he said to them, and is Matthew and Mark. Because I have that added statement from John, I will have the he from Luke. He said to them, not just and says. So the he is in Luke, and it's in Mark, not Matthew. Only Luke has said, the rest is says. I guess I'll just use says instead of said. Matthew has to the disciples, Luke to them. Mark has to his disciples. I think that's the best way. To is all three. His disciples is only Mark. Disciples is Matthew and Mark. His statement in Matthew, sit you here while I go and pray yonder. Mark, sit you here while I shall pray. So sit you here is both. And again, Luke is the most different. Pray that you enter not in temptation. But that one, again, I'm saving for the next statement he says. So I'm just going to stop with Luke, just Matthew, Mark. Sit you here. That's both. Matthew, while I go and pray yonder. Mark, while I is the same. So just while I shall pray, or go and pray yonder. The fact that he goes further with Peter, James, and John makes me think that he should say, while I go and pray yonder, not just while I pray. So I'm going to put go and from Matthew. Pray is both. Yonder is Matthew. And the word shall, I don't think I have any place to put that. Sit you here while I shall go and pray yonder. I think go encapsulates what he's saying. So just yonder now from Matthew.